it somehow resets it. So
Yeah, well, that's not unusual that my computer also periodically has like audio channel issues where it can't figure out what channel it's supposed to be on and stuff like that.
I
But
think you get like a backup charge, like somewhere in the motherboard or something, and it's just confused. I don't know. Either way, it's fixed now. So
can you turn on your camera?
sure. It's a I don't have a good place to mount it, so it's kind of gonna be sketchy.
It's fine. It'll be better than just picture of me. Um, okay,
All right, cool.
so we are currently recording. I just started it about a second ago. So, hi, I'm host Eric. Welcome to Talking with Famous People. This is somebody whose name is a succession of consonants.
Uh,
Uh,
it's you can just call me Zach. That's my name. So,
okay, Zach.
yeah,
This is famous person Zach, and I would like to start right in with some questions, Zach.
sure.
First of all, if you are not talking or listening, what do you think's going on in your head?
Uh, well, most of the time I'm thinking about some concept or thing I've been working on, or it's typically not related to anything that's going on around me, I'd say. Like something that I've been thinking about that is, if there's other people in the room, it's typically not what they're, talking about or whatever. So
Um, do you
I guess, I
find
guess
yourself more
uh,
easily distracted by sights or sounds?
I think I'm more easily distracted by sounds. Um, in the sense that they bother me more, I guess. Like, and a really annoying sound is much more bothering to me than some unsightly thing.
Okay,
So,
but but let's take the degree element out of it. Let's just say this: there's a room you're asked to attend to a task that requires mental focus in a room. There's two options you have to choose from. One room has a large screen TV that's on, showing pictures, but um, no sound. The other has a large screen TV that's only playing the sound of the TV and not the picture. Which room would you rather be in?
uh, I don't really know, honestly. It would depend on what's being the content, I'd say, in that
Assume
in
it's
that
like
scenario.
it's random, banal, like local news talk. Is
Oh,
that,
uh, well, I guess I'd want to be able to hear it if there was no subtitles, but
but
that's kind of
you're
avoiding the
not supposed
question.
to listen to it. You're not supposed to be listening to it. You're supposed to be doing whatever you're supposed to be doing.
uh, I think I would probably rather be listening then in that case. If I'm supposed to be doing something else, yeah, rather be listening.
Do you
I
find
think
yourself
the
as either a consumer or a creator inclined more towards musical stuff or visual arts?
um I'd say that it's a little bit of a split, uh, in the sense that when I've been creative, it's typically very visual, but I definitely appreciate the audio side of it. I just haven't really done any like audio production of any type or anything like that. Like it just hasn't been accessible, but I think that would be interesting too. But the way I think is much more visual, so that seems more approachable, I guess. Um,
So when you say you
I
think
don't know.
visually, what do you mean? You're able to visualize things well?
Yeah, I mean, as a kid, I had a very, you know, well, still quite a vivid imagination, and I typically visualize problems, albeit kind of abstractly, I guess. Like if it's a more abstract problem, it's not going to have like a regular sort of normal visual structure. You might see like a network or something, but that might be an effect of my education. I'm not sure. So,
Um, did you have growing up a lot of imaginary worlds that you created?
oh yeah, that's mostly what I did. Like I grew up. My parents ran a summer camp, and I was mostly alone most of the time. And I was pretty much, I'd go out and I have all these, fantasy worlds and that kind of thing going on.
Um, if you were to pick a group of people size that you're going to hang out with, you got three choices. It's like a Friday night or something. You can either go out on a one-on-one date with some special lady or male, depending on your inclination, and or you could go out with a group of two people who are not themselves a couple, just three friends, or you could go into a setting where the group larger than three. Which do you choose?
I think I would probably prefer one or two, and I think that whether I would pick one or two would depend on the personality, um, in the sense that if it's someone that I think I could have like really interesting conversations with and stuff, I'd probably want just one person. But if it's something like I don't know, it's hard to say, but I definitely wouldn't like a large group. I could
Or
say
you
that for
could
sure.
stay home and read.
Well, that seems to be what I'd probably prefer to do. Um, is is typically I migrate towards more lonely endeavors, but I still um, crave I guess like companionship and people to talk to. But sometimes when I talk to people, I'm more talking to myself. I feel like sometimes.
Because, well, do you find you have to sometimes adjust the level of what you're saying to the audience?
Kind of a little bit, but I meant more that sometimes when I have conversations with people without realizing it, it's almost like an internal monologue, and I'm just like talking at them to myself. So
So do
I
you
don't.
feel you're more likely to fill up the conversation than the other person is?
Um, in a small group, probably. In a large group, I probably be more quiet. I think.
Interesting. Do you feel do you feel gratified by pulling shit off that is impressive?
Mm, I mean, yes and no. I think that like if it's impressive to myself, I think is the thing that really matters to me. Like typically, unless it's like some practical thing, like let's say I need to do this impressive thing in order to get like some sort of um, reward or tangible physical thing from the outside world, then it's kind of like satisfying. It's like, oh, I succeeded in what I was trying to do. Like let's say I was writing like a an application for like a stipend, or something like that. Like by being impressive in that, I feel like competent, and but it doesn't really like have any intrinsic real value to me. It's more like, oh, I got these resources, like whatever.
Do you think it's possible that you could be on your deathbed and have lived so well that you say, okay, now is the perfect time to go. I'm 90 years old and I did it. I succeeded. I pulled it all off somehow. And this is the perfect
No,
ending. No?
no, absolutely not. I mean, how could you ever be done with everything you could be? I mean, I don't see how that would be a thing. I mean, maybe that opinion changes when you're on your deathbed because you want to reconcile certain things and try and be consistent, maybe. But
What you
in my
mean?
current
You
mindset,
just shift your thinking so that your life was good at the end, or what?
I think people shift their thinking to satisfy their environment all the time. So probably.
Well, here's a question I have for you. Are you an ENTP?
No, I don't think so. I'm pretty confident that I'm a well, as far as the typing goes, I think I'm INTP just because well, th things have changed. I think a little bit since I left high school. Like I feel like I've had personality changes for various reasons, but I definitely feel introverted.
Well, it wouldn't shock me if you were an INTP, and to the extent that individuals are mistyped, it tends to be by, in this area, it tends to be that I would think an INTP might be an ENTP or vice versa. If you're an INTP, you're a Zach school of INTP, the other Zach, host Zach, and let me just say hi to Greyel here. Um, and I this actually plays in with the line of thinking I've been entertaining of late, which is that there are two distinct types of INTPs, and one of them is more FE. One of them is more FE heavy. So the more FE kind, like the two Zachs, you and host Zach, I would suggest are somewhat like having FE and SI reversed. Would you how likely are you to forget a writing utensil or some other necessary thing when you go to some school or work thing or whatever?
Pretty. I mean, my natural behavior seems to be forget everything, but I've gotten a bunch of strategies as I've gotten older to kind of compensate for that. So
Okay,
not so
so
much anymore, but
to me that sounds well. It sounds like you. It sounds like this little theory of mine that there's a subtype of INTP that kind of have FE and SI reversed is is plausible, or you could be an ENTP. Now, you said you grew up in a place where you spent a lot of time by yourself, didn't have a lot of other kids to play with, right?
well, it's complicated because so this was a summer camp for deaf and hard of hearing children that my parents ran, like a nonprofit sort of thing, and so while there were various kids near my age, it wasn't always easy to connect with them because they were there to connect with other deaf people, and I was like this hearing person. So
Do you use sign language?
my first language when I grew up like was sign language, but I lost most of it except for like basic grammar as I got older because I just didn't use it. So
Are are your parents deaf?
no, my mom is a speech language pathologist and just got into that uh, field through various career you know unfoldings, I guess.
Interesting. Well, I want to kind of get to the bottom of this ENTP INTP thing because to me the differences between ENTP and INTP are a couple. One, there's some kinds of INTPs. First of all, INTPs tend to give shorter answers, less expansive answers, and they tend to be um, slower to answer. I guess they consider things more. But I mean, all right. Well, let me ask you some more questions.
Okay.
If you were on an island, you're shipwrecked on an island. There's 7 people on the island. You've all swum through the sharks successfully. The rest of the boat all got eaten by sharks. And there's only these 7 left. You're on this desert island, or not desert, but deserted.
Sure.
And um, do you want the leadership role to the extent that there's going to be one?
No, I want to be the court wizard.
Okay.
I want to be the advisor, but I don't want to have the I want to lend my expertise, and I think I'm good at like understanding a scenario sort of objectively and seeing all the pieces. But when it comes to managing people, those are the pieces that I have a harder time dealing with, and I find it very stressful. Like I don't really like to be the leader or to be led too strongly. I prefer to work out a
So
different way
let's
of.
say the guy who steps up and becomes the leader, he's ENTJ. He's effective, but he's you consider him presumptuous, being an NTP of some sort, of course. You are you're somehow deeply appalled by his assertiveness. Like, hello, motherfucker. But I think INTPs and ENTPs share that. I think we share it in different ways. This guy's a dick, but he's effective. He's getting the job done. How do you feel about it?
Well, I think that if I was younger, I would be very upset and constantly spew conflict, I think. But I think that if he was effective and things, and especially in a survival situation, I think in that environment, I would probably hold my tongue and just try and be productive. Or if I couldn't handle it, I'd probably branch off and do something on my own if it was, if it was something like everyone wanted to be under his leadership. You know.
You know,
And
because they say that, hi, Grail.
sorry to cut you off.
Oh, that's
Oh, no
okay.
worries.
Please.
Just a quick question.
Uh-huh.
Sure.
Um, so Iximi, is that how you say it?
Yeah, you can just call me Zach if you want.
Oh, okay. So Zach, do you have any siblings?
I have none that I grew up with. I have a half brother um, on my dad's side, but he was 15 years older than me, so I didn't really have much contact with him. So the typical dynamics you'd expect from a sibling, I don't think were really there.
Okay, thanks.
See, that's very INTP. You're a little bit more expansive than Grail. Uh, I mean, I'm still leaning towards ENTP in my assessment, but of course, there's something, I suppose, ontologically violent about asserting that somebody is wrong about their own self-assessment about their
Well,
type.
I mean, I kind of think that, these are just boxes, you can put people in, but I think that, two, um, after being, the last few years, I think I've developed a lot. My personality has changed in some respect, in that I am better in relating to the outside world than I used to be.
I
So,
don't think they're boxes. I think they're descriptions that are more or less accurate. And
well, I think
uh,
they're predictive if you fit nicely into you know
I think they
the
can be
model.
predictive, but I think that in their most definitive sense, you could analyze your day and break it down in terms of proportions of the day spent driven by any possibilities and disruption and stuff like that. Proportions of the day driven by TI or a mixture of those two. Portions of the day where you're motivated more by FE and behaviors that reflect that. I think you could go through the day and keep track of your behaviors, and that the proportion of time you spend in exercising those perspectives could be determinable, and that there'd be a ratio of some sort that you could point to
Well,
and say,
I would say that you'd have like an expected value, right? But there'd be deviations all the time. You know,
well, I mean, you'd have to look at it over time, right? You'd have
yeah.
to,
You look at like if you give it like statistical treatment, I think that yeah, the typings are pretty accurate, but it's this sort of little things that happen that don't quite match up with you know
right.
um,
Well, but the thing is, the problem I have with type descriptions in general is that they tend to say, well, because you're this type, you are this way and that way, and you like this and you don't like that, and yada yada yada. Whereas I
right.
think
Well,
a
it
more
ignores environmental factors that would affect you.
well, I think a more accurate description would say something like, you're likely to dismiss these sort of arguments in these contexts, and that'll, depending on your work and the type of stuff you do, that's going to comprise accordingly parts of your day, because I think you can predictably say that NTPs are going to react to somebody who's pedantic in advising them with a certain, um, oh hell no, right? Like
Yeah, exactly.
that's very predictable. But there aren't that many contexts in which you run into that necessarily. So it's a matter of you're describing past occurrences for people and saying, if this has occurred to you, then it's a symbol, it's a signal of something. Or you're saying, watch your own behavior going. That's the thing. When you start cognating about it and you metacognate about it, obviously you change the ecosystem itself,
Yeah.
and and so that's what makes it non-falsifiable. Which I understand what you're saying, that in that regard, it's just a box and that it's non-falsifiable. But I do like the model in the sense that I'm waiting for somebody to tell me a perspective other than those described by Jungian cognitive functions, or a perspective that doesn't fit into one of those sets. See, that to me would belie the system more successfully than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very useful. I guess to me, I just I see, for example, like on, let's see, like the INTP subreddit, and to some extent back in the day, the INTP forum. I don't know if that's still going on, but people start to get very sort of you get this kind of like tribalistic mentality, and people in the group try and get you to converge to, the typing description, and then if people deviate from the description, they're like, oh, you don't belong here, get out. Kind of that sort of thing. But I think that's not inherent to this Myers-Briggs stuff, but more so just any group.
Well, I think
Um,
it's partially has to do with the type, because ENTP type forums aren't like that. ENTP forums are people fighting with each other constantly about everything.
well, I would say that on INTP forum, that place was much more civil than the INTP subreddit. There's like I think there's a lot more younger people on the INTP subreddit, and a bunch of people that um, are very they get absorbed in this sort of like, like, oh, like I'm the secret superpower, like, like I have all these powers that no one appreciates, and they kind of build up this like ego thing about it, and I see that more on the INTP subreddit, I'd say, but
Well, I mean, I think
I don't know.
that makes sense. I've never been able to get into Reddit at all. I've had a lot of people recommend it to me, and I've never found it. Uh, it just hasn't been for me. I don't know why not. But the thing about typing, from my perspective as an ENTP, it's a matter of trying to understand why I'm so fucked up, basically. you know. So it's going to be a very different experience than the INTP coming to typing, because the INTP's got a much more sensible stack order. With NE in the second slot and TI in the dominant slot, they're they're smart and clever, but not, but they can make decisions instead of just rolling with whatever. Like I tend to just roll with whatever's in front of me, and that can be a difficult life to lead. So from my perspective, when I first encountered it, which was like when I was 30 years old, which was when I encountered MBTI, I didn't know anything about the functions. Um, I felt as though I had finally figured out what was wrong with me. Not like hooray, hooray. I mean, I was happy. I was at the time. I was happy with like the praise kind of things that one reads in those, but I was mostly satisfied by the fact that there was some diagnosis.
I guess to some extent, when I kind of got like when I first tested, I think that I got INTJ, and this was like back in high school. But I realized that um, I had entered in things that I had kind of wanted to be, not really what I had,
Uh-huh.
what I really thought about myself, like in terms of the follow through and sort of um, the taking things to action side of it was more of a desire rather than an actual thing. And then when I did finally start reading about the INTP type, it definitely it felt like, oh, like this seems sensible, like the kind of people in my life had always kind of like criticized certain parts about my behavior, and it made me kind of feel like a little bit like I didn't really like belong, or I was acting like inappropriately, and in some ways there was a little bit of comfort in seeing that, like, oh, this is like something that is recognized as just one of many different types of people, and it didn't feel like pathologized. I guess it didn't feel like it was a diagnosis.
Right. Well, look, when I'm saying it felt like a diagnosis, it didn't. It's not because of the nature of the thing felt like a diagnosis. It's because of the nature of the person coming to it, feeling as though he had behaviors that could only be explained theretofore as a failure of character, a lack of character, a lack of discipline,
Oh, okay.
and
Well, I guess in that sense, it doesn't sound too different from my experience reading the INTP type, I guess.
uh,
Um,
are you
yeah.
there, Grail?
Oh yes, I'm just listening.
Do you have any thoughts on this experiencing the discovery of typing and or cognitive functions and how it felt and what your approach to it was?
Um, I was listening to a podcast, um, and I somehow came across the INTP description. Until then, I had never really considered myself as being potentially an NTP. And I listened to it and I really agreed with it. And I think I actually tear it up a little bit because it explained a lot about the issues that I was dealing with.
Right. I certainly did. I remember I was, but I'm very cryy. I probably cry a lot more than the average INTP. But what specifically did you resonated with you and made you feel like, oh, now I see. I'm glad other people have this same thing.
I couldn't figure out why I would always question the things that I thought to be true, um, and always try to break things down, or why if I saw something I would blurt it out, despite not being in a public, or not public, but like a appropriate forum for it. I got in trouble a lot because as a female, um, and as female and being like the eldest, you have certain expectations that you must carry out, and I never really knew what they were, and I couldn't really just assume the role of being like a daughter or being like a female member of society or in school or with being an older sibling. These things were very difficult for me to understand because I would think, what does my gender have to do with anything? Why are you perceiving me differently, or why are you perceiving my thoughts as being different or invalid because of my gender, or because I'm your kid, or what have you? What I'm saying is simply an observation. So I think there was of course like immaturity associated with that, assuming that I'm correct, but a lot of these things kept me as sort of a pariah of sorts, and I could never figure out why that was the case.
Is that within your own family?
Not just family, but everywhere really.
Really? Where, I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
did you grow up in a small town or something?
no, not at all. But well, my parents' ideas. Well, I guess Asians have a very deep understanding of community, and they value it very highly. And the roles you play in community, the certain rules that you follow because of your age or your um, family placement and what have you. These things are very important. So I guess like think like dominant introverted sensing or dominant extroverted feeling type thing. So since I had such trouble with it, I thought I was just kind of like a really bad person. And then once I
I
figured
wish you
out
would come
that's
to
just
my
what the
debate
case.
school. I wish you'd come to my debate school. It's full
Well,
of Chinese girls whom I'm uh, teaching to be individualist libertarians. I'm teaching them all to raise their middle fingers. That's lesson number one. These are your middle fingers. You learn to use them.
but you have to understand the amount of pressure that these girls are probably facing in their own family and in the community they live in
Well,
to not act out.
I'm not just telling them that. I'm empowering them with debate tools. I can call
Yeah,
bullshit on that stuff. You make them answer. You turn that shit on them. You claim the moral high ground. See, that's the thing. Kids are used to letting their parents or other people claim the moral high ground. But what you got to do is you got to go in there and say, just whatever their framework is, you turn that shit on them. You're being a bad parent. You're failing to fulfill your parental duties. Like that shit. You got to turn that shit on them.
sure, I did do that by the way.
Oh, good. I'm glad. I'm
Because
happy to hear
as
that.
I've also done debate, but there
Yeah.
are repercussions.
Well, yeah,
There
but
are
you
very
you got
severe
to debate in high
repercussions.
school, huh? You got to get them
I
younger
did
than
it
that.
since middle school,
Oh, did you? Good. I'm glad. So you were a fighter, and it didn't
but
work. Are you telling me I'm teaching the children to do the wrong thing?
I'm just saying that's not necessarily in so like in a social setting, say I guess in a social setting in an American a broader social setting that works.
Uh
In a tighter community may not work. Highly likely to not work.
huh.
Instead you get because you get the comments, oh my goodness, what have they done to their children that their children are behaving this way. Reputation.
Well, but you see, here's the thing: debate's infesting them, the community, because they like the Chinese community in San Gabriel Valley. They're fairly well off. They want to see their
Hmm.
kids maximize educational outcomes. They can see, everybody can see, that debate's the most effective paradigm there is for that. So they put their kids in debate. But I mean, you can't participate in debate without becoming a free thinker. It's not possible because
Of course.
you have to argue all the different perspectives, and then you come to realize that they're sort of, that it's dependent on framework as to what you're going to actually believe. And and so when you have large quantities of them going through this process, it really, I think, starts to undermine the hierarchical control of the community. At some point, it's got to.
Yeah, it took me a while. My parents, for example, they're sort of starting to see, oh, these are the damages we've done, kind of a thing. They're like, oh, I see what you were talking about back then, and yeah, so on and so on. So I also think it depends on how many people are in the community that are open to such things. I mean, my parents are pretty religious, and so the Ten Commandments thing, thou shalt honor, I don't know, thy parents or whatever,
I'm honoring you
and
with the
you
truth, bitch.
also, oh, there's another concept. There's another understanding that it's a Confucianism. The idea, Confucianism, where the hierarchy really matters. And my, I'll just say it. I'm Korean American, and the Koreans, for some reason, have really held on to that Confucianist beliefs of that hierarchy, and as a result, you know, it's something that's completely ingrained in that society, even more so than the Chinese who originally came up with the idea that Koreans actually have a lot of trouble with this. That's just the basic framework, and if you question it, it's kind of like going against the entire grain, the entire the structure of society, and it's just they don't know how to deal with that.
Well, you know what I know how to say in Korean? I can say
Hello,
this.
hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. 담배 피는 시간이다. Do you know what that means?
Please slow down. I guess I don't know.
It means it's time to smoke a cigarette.
Ah, 담배.
담배 피는 시간이다. Is
Oh,
that
I
right?
see now. I see.
Yeah. It's smoking time. So, that's interesting. I have felt as though culturally Koreans are the most similar to Western culture of the Asian cultures. What do you think about that generalization?
I don't really see it.
What do you think's more like Western culture than Koreans that's an Asian culture? Yeah, you are an INTP, Zach. You would have tried to interrupt by now.
Well, maybe it's just I can't really comment too much about you know Asian stuff because I haven't been there, and you know
I've been to China.
I
I've been to Shanghai. It was weird. It's really weird over there. It's like full of Chinese people.
yeah, fancy that.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. Shanghai's pretty cool, I guess. I was there too long. By the time I left, I was just like, get me the fuck back into the United States of America because I cannot tolerate one more minute in this fucking hellhole. But for the first few weeks, I was like, oh my God, Shanghai, it's spectacular. I love it. So, you know, but it's so crazy, and it's so different than Taiwan. And it shows you what 50 years of centralized government will do. It's crazy. It's like because you're a white guy in China, you just like go anywhere you want and just, oh, a white man. You know, come in. Oh, yeah. The sign says don't. Sign says in English, don't enter here. You just waltz all back there. Hi, here I am. Oh, hello.
I had a friend in high school that used to live in China, and he told me that it's very strange how like you know how in the United States we have all these like tanning products and like spray tan stuff and all these things to improve your bronzeness or whatever,
Hmm. I use
and
them
in
regularly.
China, yeah, and in China, apparently it's very popular to have these whitening products, and these things have been popular before even the modern contact with the West. There's always been this sort of idea of like lightening skin. I guess the idea is that if you're if you don't have to work outside all the time, you're like better off or something, and so you have lighter skin.
Yeah,
I'm not sure, something like
That's
that.
why I bound my own feet. By the way,
Oh yeah.
people often ask when I say
Oh
I
god.
want to convince everybody they're not doing outside doing work. You know, like the Mexicans. So that's why I bind my feet.
Right. Okay.
It's a joke. I'm
It's
actually hetero in
Mongolia.
Mexico myself. I can make a few more Mexican jokes and other kind of jokes because I've had two Mexican wives, and my daughter's part Mexican, so I feel like I can get away with a little bit more Mexican jokes. Um, so what sort of stuff do you do, Zach? I know that Greyel here's a lawyer.
So
Your parents might be happy
currently,
about that, Greyel. You can tell me about that in a second. But Zach, what kind of stuff do you do?
so currently right now I'm in the final years of a chemistry degree, but I wouldn't consider myself a chemist. I would consider myself a nanoscientist more so, and because recently I've been doing a lot of research in the physics department, um, dealing with sort of nanotechnology materials and sort of building things from the ground up through a bottom up method, so like a self-assembly method rather than like a top-down method. And so what that means is more like like 3D printers that you've seen these things around, right? And they apply things like in a deposition method, like layer by layer, right? That's like a top-down method, and a bottom-up method would be like throwing a bunch of magnets in a bowl and having them all connect into a cylinder. That's like self-assembly. So I'm more interested in the self-assembly side of things because I think that that's more sustainable and like way cheaper and really cool. So
Yeah, it's really cool. It's really cool. It's like here, make yourself. But it seems so impossible. I guess you guys can figure out, you science people. So
well, it always does, right? But in reality, what you do is you weigh out a few, or you don't even you measure out a few different chemicals and you mix them together, and then things just happen. It's not so like complicated. It's like
so
you kind of just
as um as you're transitioning more into physics, that means you're just going to be cooking meth on the side now.
uh, if things go rough, there's always that option, I guess, right?
Right? Yeah. That's what everybody thinks now when they hear chemistry, right? You must hear a lot of meth lab jokes.
Right. There is a lot of that, and so many people are going into pharmacology or medicine that it almost seems like it's probably much more common than people actually realize, I would say. Um, but I haven't witnessed anyone having a clandestine lab, cooking drugs. But I'm sure it's easily accessible, right? The barrier to entry is removed, so I can't
Right.
imagine that.
The primary barrier to entry, I guess, would be knowledge, and then the secondary barrier to entry would be like having beakers and Bunsen burners. When I think of science, I think you got to have, if you really want to be successful at science, you need three things. You need a microscope, you need a Bunsen burner, and you need a beaker. With those
So
three things, you can do anything.
yeah, you just it's funny. I hardly ever use a microscope though,
Oh, really?
except for um, these days, like optical microscopes are old news, right? Now it's all about using electrons to image things, or different uh, types of imaging that is higher resolution than optical stuff.
And a dead frog. You have to have a dead frog.
Right, that you boiled to death slowly, or
I don't know how. I'm not sure how you have to have killed it, but I do know that if you're doing improper science, it's kind of like the parrot on the pirate's shoulder. You have a dead frog in your lab coat pocket
right, sure,
in case you
yeah.
have to do some off the cuff dissection. You'll have something available. Um,
Right, just in case you need to harvest an organ real quick, and you know.
so last time Greyel and I talked, you were telling me that you did law, and I'm guessing that on that vector, your parents must feel as though you accomplished your duty as number one daughter, right?
Yep,
And so that gives you a little bit more leverage in the arguments now, huh?
it does.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like you played it
It does,
smart.
and it's seriously sad.
They just don't even stand a chance anymore. Are you taking pity on them now and stop yelling at them about shit or what?
Yeah, I just had to, suffer through law school. I pay for bar exams and go through all that pain just so that I could get an upper hand in arguments against them.
Right. Well, the other thing is, I mean, you must make good money doing that. You can always put it away and try to do something more interesting. I'm sure that's not your life's dream was when you were a little girl, like, oh my God, if only I could work on government regulations. And, it's like that can't possibly be what you really, really want to do, right?
I mean, I did want to be a lawyer. I just it wasn't quite the area. I hadn't think I was gonna go into this area. That's for sure.
Because did you imagine being a lawyer, you picture yourself in a courtroom?
Um, I did, or I really imagined myself doing all these research and helping people out by finding information that somehow, miraculously solved everything, that kind of stuff,
Who are
which
you
is totally
helping right now?
unrealistic, but I was
Who are you helping right
like
now?
9. Technically, it's the American investor, so anybody with a 401k, stock options, what have you.
So you're a lawyer for the government then?
Yes.
Oh, see, I thought you were a lawyer for like a corporation dealing with the government. But you're a lawyer for the
Mm-mm.
government. That's fun. Um,
I feel like Eric is losing respect for you by the
no, I'm
second.
not at all, dude. Not even remotely. Listen, I want to stress. Here's a couple things everybody should know about me. I worked for LA County for something like 8 or 9 years. I need to get around to getting my money out of CalPERS, because they took a bunch of money from me, then they forced you to pay into their retirement program. But their retirement program is actually a good retirement program. So I have quite a, I've got like 10 grand or something in there from my time working there. Maybe even more than that. I don't know how much is in there, um, but I worked for the government, and my job was so pointless. My job was so pointless. It was killing. It was killing me. It was killing my soul, because of IDEA, the Individual with Disabilities Education Act. You have to provide a modified version of the regular education for all students. It doesn't matter how completely incapable of it they are. So the students I was working at for most of my career with the county were 18 to 22-year-olds. Because if you're mentally retarded, or whatever term they use for it now, then you get to go stay in school until you're 22. But they were profoundly retarded, so that they they were not almost all non-ambulatory. They were in wheelchairs and nonverbal, and basically uh, varying degrees of vegetative. So my job was custodial. I had to pick them up and lift them up onto the table and stuff. But I also had to do IEPs for these people, which means individuated education plans, where I explain how I'm going to modify the regular high school curriculum for these individuals. And it's something you have to do because it's the law, but it doesn't make any sense at all that the taxpayer is putting so many resources to this my tiny minority subpopulation that gains almost no benefit from anything you're doing.
Right. It's I mean my mom being a speech language pathologist, like, I've seen all the red tape that she's had to go through with these kind of things. And I also know some people right now that are in the special education program at the university, like learning to become, special education teachers. And yeah, it's kind of disturbing the amount of all the focus is on demonstrating to the people that provide the funding for your programs that you are doing what they said. And it doesn't, like, the focus, like the selective pressure for curriculum and the selective pressure on the entire system seems to be focused entirely on making people feel like they've been accomplishing something, not actually helping anyone learn something.
There's an old world system that's predicated on symbols of competence and symbols of accomplishment that I believe is antiquated and needs to wither and die. But I also believe that this video is long enough and we should stop it and start a new one. This one is 45 minutes. That seems like a good length to me.
Oh, geez.